The reason we feel guilty when we think about or even attempt to set boundaries is in that moment, we are not our authentic self. We have actually fallen back into a childlike state, something called the adapted wounded child. Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks and help explain why it's so difficult to set boundaries, but most of all, give you the skills, the knowledge, skills, and tools to remove that guilt so that you can set boundaries. Now, the thing to recognize is that guilt that we all feel, that almost all of us feel when setting boundaries, was created when we tried to be our authentic self as a child and we were shamed. We were not allowed to. When we went to express ourselves, our parents, because they are perfectly imperfect, tried to regulate our behavior, which is healthy, but inadvertently shamed us as a person. And so if we pursue us, we're bad. And that created an internal rule inside of us. I can't be me. If I try to be me, I'm bad, I'm defective, I'm breaking the family rules, and therefore I'm a burden, I'm defective, and this is the most terrifying thing. If I am my authentic self, I will lose attachment. Now remember, we as a species must physically and emotionally attach to another human being. And so underneath all of this fear around setting boundaries is I don't care if you're 70 years old and you're struggling with boundaries, you are in the adapted wounded child state. You are virtually an infant, in that 3 to kind of 10 years old or birth to 10 years old. Afraid that if I do this, mom and dad won't love me or my caregivers won't love me. And therefore, setting boundaries for you is incredibly unsafe. It creates the feeling of tremendous fear and abandonment. This is what gives birth to what I talk about all the time, what I discovered, something called the worst day cycle. And it's something we are all stuck in. I wrote a whole book on it. My whole platform is in giving people the knowledge, skills, and tools to conquer their worst day cycle because we are all stuck repeating these childhood experiences against ourselves until we gain emotional mastery and the skills and tools to heal it. So if you want to learn more about the worst day cycle, it's all in my book here. You can also go to my playlist, the worst day cycle playlist, where I've done a 5-part series to kind of walk you through the basics of it. Obviously, the book is your best bet to get the full understanding of it. Actually, the two together, because even since I've written the book, I've expanded my knowledge of how to communicate it better. So anything you do to understand how the cycle works will help you overcome this. And that's what I'm going to give you today. I'm going to give you a 5-step process here to help you remove the guilt and be able to set boundaries more easily. And it's basically I'm going to give you the kind of the beginnings of emotional mastery, because that's what we need to recover from the worst day cycle and gain the skills and knowledge to reclaim our authentic self. Now, the first step in this is to identify the guilt. And to do that, we need to use emotional mastery. And if you go to my where all my master classes are, www.thegreatnessyou.com, I'm giving away your journey to emotional mastery. This is the foundational course of all of my courses, so you have the basics to learn how to gain emotional mastery. I no longer charge for it. I give it free because I think it's that essential for people to have this skill. And if you believe that too, please like, follow, and share this, because I think people want this. And I think people want to live their life this way. They just need the information. And that's why I ask for the likes and follows, is because I believe strongly that if people knew this would make their life easier, if they just had the information, they'd do it. But they don't have the information. And the reason we all struggle is we don't have the information. So that's why I ask for it, okay? So go to www.thegreatnessyou.com and start taking my emotional mastery course, Your Journey to Emotional Mastery. It's free. Now, what you're going to learn at the beginning is a 3-step process, and this will help you identify the guilt and the shame that was placed into you. There's a feelings wheel and a 30-day journey book to help you catalog this. And you're going to learn to ask yourself, what am I feeling? Where in my body do I feel it? And what's my first memory? And what you're going to see is you're going to have a lot of memories of every time you go to set boundaries of a feeling coming up, and you're going to trace it all the way back, and you're going to go, oh my God, he's right. This did start in childhood. He's not crazy after all. And that's where you learned to be afraid to be your authentic self. Basically, all these worst days, we've all had many of them, and it doesn't have to be this big traumatic event. It's just that moment where I got shamed for being a spontaneous kid. Boom. I learned I cannot be my authentic self. That's where the split started, okay? So now that you have that, you're aware of, oh my gosh, there is such thing as a worst day cycle. I am caught in it. Now I'm in reality. Now I know where to look. Now I can start doing the healing work on all this guilt and shame around claiming myself and being kind and loving to me and others by setting boundaries. And that leads to step 2. Catalog the mantras. In those moments as a child, you learned specific things to say to yourself to minimize, justify, repress, suppress the painful experience. You somehow catalog this in a way that it's okay to give away your authentic self. That's the first part of the mantra. It was like, well, this doesn't matter. This is the right thing to do. Like you have justified all of those childlike thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and behaviors. When you created the adapted wounded child and you took on all these false beliefs to keep attachment with your parents, you created mantras to justify your parents' perfectly imperfect treatment of you. You need to identify what those mantras are. You also need to identify that in that moment, you felt the shame. You felt the guilt. There was an anger, a resentment that you wanted to express, but you knew you couldn't. And tied to that was mantras. That's where you developed a mantra to suppress yourself. Like mine, I've talked about this before, was, oh, what's the point? What did you, or here's another one. I notice this a lot. I go play tennis and the pros, just people sign up and you just hit. Like it's nothing serious. I just go to run around. But sometimes when I hit a bad shot, I'll hear myself go, Kenneth, what are you thinking? Well, what did my dad say to me as a kid? Kenneth, what are you thinking? It's the only time I ever heard Kenneth. And so right then I know I've just dropped in, I'm a kid, I'm feeling shame, belittled by my father. Well, what mantras do you have? And that's how you're stuck in the adapted wounded child. When we say those things, we are not present. We are not 70 years old or 40 years old or 25. We are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years old. We are in the adapted wounded child, belittling and shaming ourselves and replaying the mantras that we were taught. All right? So we need to catalog those and become aware of them. That's step 2. Step 3, this is the toughest. We need to make a choice. Am I done reliving this pain against myself? Am I done victimizing myself by saying, Kenneth, what are you thinking? Am I ready to reclaim my authentic self? Now that scares the living heck out of us, and you'll learn about this in my book. And as you discover conquering the worst day cycle, what happens is when we go, and this may not make sense to you, especially if you're new to my material, but those who have been working the process, they're like, ooh, this doesn't feel right to go this way, because you're breaking those family bonds, those family rules of I have to be this person with no boundaries who gets trampled and has these mantras. I can't give those up. That's who I am. That was my role in the family. And so it literally feels like a death of us. It also feels like I'm going to lose my parents and the connection to those I love. Well, that's a scary, like I don't want to minimize that for you. I know how scary it was for me. But we need to make the choice to reclaim ourselves. We need to recognize that the fear we're experiencing over making this choice was created in childhood. That is the adapted wounded child. And that means we are not present in our life. That internal battle we have, the hesitancy we have, is proof that we are not living in our authentic self. We need to make the choice that it's time to be an adult, to claim our authentic self, that we deserve to be the glorious individual we were all born to be, and that it was not our parents' intent to hurt us. This is a dynamic that is present for all of us because as a society, we've never taught about the worst day cycle. We've never provided this information. We teach about everything in school except the two most important things we need to learn about: how to be a parent and how to have a relationship. Isn't that fascinating? Like, think about it. Life is all about parenting and relationships, and we don't learn anything about it. Like, that's just amazing to me. And government's pushing all these things we need to learn about and do, and I'm like, I'm not a big fan of the government being involved in telling us what to do, but I just find that incredible. The essence of life, we don't learn anything about. That's fascinating to me. So that's why I don't blame parents. I don't blame you. I don't blame me. None of us are to blame. How the heck could we have It's a wonder any of us have accomplished anything because we've had no information on how to do it. Like, we are all pretty darn magnificent, in my eyes at least. So that's step number 3. Make the choice to reclaim your authentic self. Step number 4. Remember what happened? The mantras. What did we do? Suppression. We pushed down our anger and our rage. The death as the child, as we're realizing, I can't be me. We had to internalize the rage because we had to put on the nice face, even those who became the rebel child. We could not express ourselves, so we internalized that rage. And that's what step 4 is to write a rage letter. And the key to this is to be as judgmental and as ugly as possible. Don't be nice. Now, I'm not saying you mail this to your parents. I'm not saying you give this to them. This isn't for them. This isn't to beat up your parents. This is for you. This is to give that inner child inside of you, the authentic child inside of you, the voice they never got to speak. Like, you get to talk now. You get to express, man, this hurt. This wasn't right. You blankety blank. Like, why didn't you go learn about this? All right? Like, it's okay. Because do you see what a boundary is? When even a kind, loving boundary of, yeah, I'd rather not go watch the movies tonight. Do you recognize what that is? No. No. You can't do this to me. And that's why the rage letter. Because we've suppressed our God-given ability to stand up for ourselves, we need to kind of go way over to the other side. Like, we've suppressed it so far over here, we need to swing the pendulum way over here. So we learn what it feels like to go, oh, yeah, that doesn't work for me. We also need to let out the emotion that we haven't let out, because anger, all this internalized rage is one of the main conditions, fibromyalgia, arthritis, cancer. There's so many illnesses and diseases that are directly tied to the inability to say no, the inability to set boundaries, the inability to express anger, depression. Like, most illness and disease are this. All right, they have this element. And that's why, man, you're going to feel your health will improve tremendously at being able to, when you're able to express this, okay? Now let's move on to step 5. This is where we give the guilt and shame back to our parents. Now, as I say all the time, the only reason our parents did this is it's what was done to them. Now, they may have decided to parent completely in the opposite, like I see a lot of people say that. Well, that's fine, but that doesn't mean you healed the guilt and shame. That just means you learn to exercise it in the polar opposite way, because you don't heal guilt and shame without going back and healing guilt and shame. Just doing the polar opposite doesn't mean you've healed it. That just means you're expressing it in the polar opposite way, just like I talk about with narcissists. The person attracted to the narcissist and the narcissist, they are equally perfectly imperfect, equally damaged. I don't know what words would make you not feel disparaged, whichever side you're on. Usually the person attracted to the narcissist does not like to hear anything truthful about, look, you're just as perfectly imperfect as the narcissist. You just express it polar opposite. You're both manipulating and controlling. And if you aren't sure of how that, please go watch my video, The 7 Ways We Attract a Narcissist, and you'll see, oh my gosh, yes, we are just as controlling and manipulative. The difference is we do it from the disempowered position, not the falsely empowered. Now, there is a major difference between the narcissist and the one attracted. The narcissist isn't capable of empathy and will rarely, if ever, get help. The one attracted to is capable of empathy, and they will go get help, all right? That's the major difference. But the reason they're attracted to each other is they pursue relationship exactly the same, but from polar opposites, okay? And the same thing with parenting. Just because our parents did this and we want the polar opposite, unless we've healed, we're exercising the parenting dynamics, but now we're being uber nice, right? And well, that's still the same thing. So remember, maturity is moderation. It's in the middle, all right? It's not in the polars, okay? So we have to learn to give the guilt and shame back to our parents, and that requires 2 things. The first is empathy. Just like with the narcissist, like people don't like that I have empathy for narcissists. Well, I know what created. I know people think it's genetics. There is no scientific proof that it's genetics. If you can show me a study that proves it, and every study that says it's genetic, they've interviewed people who've become adults. Well, hello, they were raised by narcissists. That's why they've developed it. Like you can't just test a gene as an infant and go, oh, narcissism. It's developed. And what we also know about genetic studies, that genes get turned on. You may have the gene, but unless you're in the environment for that gene to activate, it won't. And that's why narcissists are created. They're not born. It creates an environmental condition for that genetic predisposition to turn on, okay? So I have tremendous empathy for anyone who's struggling with pain, and a narcissist is. And that's healthy. If we don't have empathy for that, that means we are narcissistic. We are lacking. Do you see that? The people that don't have empathy for the narcissist. Remember what I said? Disempowered, falsely empowered, that they operate the same way. These people who still have the rage and hatred, and you'll see that on my narcissism post, they don't want to give them empathy, and they're proving my point. That's a narcissistic view. You don't have empathy. It's heartbreaking to me. So that's why with our parents, for this guilt and shame, we need to have empathy. It's heartbreaking that our society has never taught how to be a parent or how to have relationships. Our parents had no shot, none at all, to figure this out. Also, if you can show me any adult between 14 and 30 years old that is emotionally mature, I've never met one, never seen one. And that's the general basic age. We were all raised, our parents' ages were when we were raised, even up to 40. They had no shot. Life is difficult. Well, I have tremendous empathy for that. Even, I went through a lot of difficult things in my childhood. But my God, my parents were 16 and 18. Good luck. Like, the fact that any of us survived, like that's brilliant parenting. Like, think of that. 16 and 18, 4 kids by 21 and 23, and the fact that the 4 of us weren't killed, like that's a miracle. That's how I feel. When you learn what it takes to be a really attuned, proper parent, you realize it's a miracle any of us aren't dead as children. Like what, I don't care what we've been through and how awful our parents were, or perfect, whatever you want to say. It's a miracle, especially because we don't teach any of this stuff. So that's the first thing, is empathy. The second thing is rage. We didn't get to stand up to our parents when they were being imperfect, and that's why we can't set boundaries. And so it's perfectly okay for us to learn to say, damn it, this wasn't right. I didn't deserve this. And so what I learned to do was I reach in and I grab that shame and guilt. And I'm like, Mom, Dad, I'm done. I mean, it's a 2-step process. I love you. I'm so sad you were so hurt that this is the best you could do. But I'm done. I'm done caring it for you. It was your job to learn how to be a parent. And you left that job to me. I'm done. You take it. And if you read my book, I had that discussion with my father. I gave it back to him. He tried to dump it into me just before he died. And for the first time in my life, I said, Dad, I love you, but I will not carry your pain for you anymore. And I'm not saying we have to do that to every parent, but we have to do it symbolically. This is embarrassing. I just do it all day long. I would go for walks, and all of a sudden I get the shame burp, I get a recollection of something, and I'd go through that process, and I realize, oh my God, like there's someone walking 20 feet from me, and I'm like, sorry. Yeah, I don't know, I say some sort of joke or something hits me in the moment, but that's what I do. It's what I need to recover, and I'm okay with it. I don't have shame over my perfect imperfections and that I'm working my tail off to be a better parent and better person. Not that I succeed at it as much as I would like, but I keep trying. Okay? So there's your 5-step process. If you want even more skills and tools at this, again, I would suggest you go to my YouTube channel and you go to my Worst Day Cycle playlist, watch the 5-part series on reclaiming your authentic self by becoming trauma-informed. Also, I've created a new shame and guilt playlist. Please take advantage of all those because there's a difference between shame and guilt, and knowing that difference will really help you navigate all of this. Again, I would encourage you to purchase my book, Your Journey to Success, because it'll walk you through the worst day cycle. And I personally believe, unless you know how the worst day cycle works, even if you're pursuing other teachers, and there's so many good teachers out there helping people, but without the understanding of how trauma, fear, shame, and denial work in your life, you can't put into place all their wonderful skills and tools. And so that's why I suggest it. Again, I ask you, please follow me. Please share this. If you think it's of value, if you align with my beliefs on this stuff, because again, do you hear the common message in everything I say? People just don't know. Our parents didn't know. We didn't teach this. And so that's why I'm doing it, because people don't know. Well, I believe in people. I believe in you. I believe in everybody. I believe when you learn that, you hear this information, you'll choose it and your life will get better. And so that's why I ask you to pass it along to others, because the only way we'll turn this around is if people know about it. So, as always, leave me your comments. And the most important piece is just enjoy the journey.